The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing. I'm your host, Dave. I'm joined here with my co-host, Greg, and we are in the holiday spirit. So we decided to do something that has nothing to do with the holidays that you might be in the spirit for.
Yeah.
Depending on
your culture.
But all right, so I guess a better way to look at it is a more unconventional holiday because it's not one that is shared by the mass population of the United States, I would say, but a very specific demographic celebrate it.
Sure.
Am I towing some lines here?
Well, I mean, I've always heard rumblings of it, and I was always kind of interested, like, hey, what is that? I wonder what that's all about. And I did always kind of associate it with the African American community, obviously, but never really dug in to figure out exactly what it was. And I've always been kind of wondering, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
What about you? Like, what's your sort of history with it?
Completely wrong, actually. Always associated it with something to do with like a religion.
Oh.
And has nothing to do with a religion actually at all.
I suppose I did too. I thought it was, well, in a way, you know, I used to always think that maybe it was a sort of an ancient holiday.
Okay. Which is not the case either.
Which is not the case at all, except in the way that the same way Christmas was a new holiday at a couple thousand years ago, but it had kind of glommed onto holidays that were already very successful and very popular. And it was like, all right, well, this is a good time of year. This is a good tradition for that. And I think part of Kwanzaa was taking from, ancient African traditions and festivals and using that as sort of a backdrop and sort of so you can just kind of like roll right into it, I think.
Yeah. So this episode, essentially our goal here is to be just completely humbled by the idea that we are literally learned something about like something that we probably should have already known. And we've been ignorant and like I don't think we're alone in that ignorance. I think unfortunately there's probably a lot of people who are ignorant to what Kwanzaa is all about and why it exists and how it started. And so our goal is to just dig into this a little bit, not act like we know more than we actually know. And, it's interesting. Before we like dig into Kwanzaa, I do have to just say this one statement. I recently discovered, people have been leaving comments on Spotify this whole time. And here I was thinking that there was no interaction available on Spotify. And then there's like this Spotify content creators thing that I logged into after however long we've been doing this, finally this past weekend. And I was like, holy crap, some of you have been reaching out to us on Spotify this whole time. Good and bad, mostly good. So thank you for that.
Good and bad. Yeah. I think that you said there was like one bad. But
one and a half. One and a half.
Okay. Well, and
it wasn't a terrible.
It was all right. I mean, what do you want? You can't please everybody.
Right? Well, one person kind of, just highlighted that, like, I think it was our EMDR episode that we had some of the stuff they felt like wasn't exactly how it goes for EMDR therapists, and we're not EMDR therapists. So yeah, thank you for, shedding some light onto what we missed. But if we miss anything, it's not because we're trying to spread false information. It's just we don't do every single thing.
And here's the other thing about that is we are kind of just trying to learn about these things in a week, and we can't become experts in a week. And also, we just want to kind of really highlight the things that are interesting about certain subjects, so that like maybe it will get you interested as well. That's our goal.
We did have one person who listened to our ACT episode and wanted to know if you had any book recommendations, and I didn't personally have any, so I let them know that I would reach out to you to see if you did. I know that you've been digging a little bit more into ACT since that episode too.
Was it a therapist or just Well, if it's a therapist, I recommend the
Yeah.
ACT Flip Chart book. It's actually really kind of fun and useful. But if you're just interested in it, there's a book called The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and it is very useful. I find metaphors very useful and helpful for people to kind of like get these big ideas. It's like visualizing it, seeing it, and sort of applying it to your own life all at the same time. I really like metaphors. So
I like puns.
you do. You're very punny.
Puns
Yeah.
can be really helpful and sometimes also get you in a lot of trouble.
I like puns as well.
Yeah.
I like when you do a good pun. So should we get back to Kwanzaa?
Sure.
All right.
So I was saying that thing about Spotify. So if people do leave us messages, we will respond now that we know where to find them. And if there's anything in this episode we don't get right or you want to elaborate on because you feel like it, it'd be interesting to us, please feel free to let us know.
Yeah. 5-star, and then you can send us a letter with all the complaints. So listen, Kwanzaa is a Pan-African holiday, and I hadn't had to figure out Pan-African. I've heard of like Pan-American Airlines and things like that.
Pansexual.
Pansexual. Yeah. So it's kind of like encompassing everything, uniting everything, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was really
what it is, Greg.
So I wonder if it comes from Pan, like
Peter Pan.
No, the mythological creature.
Nobody knows that one.
Okay. So, anyways, with the flute, it unites people, I think. So it traces
Fiddler
back.
on the Roof.
Nope.
Oh. Pied Piper.
Listen, we've kind of covered all that stuff. Right? Definitely the Pied Piper. This is gonna be something that it obviously traces back to traditional African harvest celebrations. All holidays sort of have a lot to do with harvest, don't they? The best ones, anyways. It's either before or after. It's all about the harvest. It's a very important time of year. Changing of seasons is very important stuff. And the name derives, and this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna probably mispronounce a lot of things during this episode. It's a lot of opportunity for that. So the name derives from Swahili, though, and Swahili was used because a lot of African nations and regions are familiar with Swahili. And it's Matunda ya Kwanzaa. And that just means the first fruits.
Yeah. So, like you said, I guess Swahili would be like what Spanish is becoming here in some ways.
Or maybe even like I was thinking of it in
English.
terms of Latin.
Latin, okay,
Or-
yeah. So
or
it was decided to be like the language for communication amongst all African languages.
Yeah.
So, but the interesting thing is, so Kwanzaa has two A's, and the Matunda ya Kwanzaa that you just spoke of, which means first fruits or refers to like the harvest festivals, has only one A. The story goes, the individual who you will talk about shortly that created Kwanzaa, he added an extra A, and that was simply because he wanted to accommodate the 7 children that were at the first ever Kwanzaa celebration. And each of those letters represented one of those children. So he added an extra A just to represent one of those kids, which is kind of
That's what happened to my Mimi. My sister couldn't say meme, and she ended up being Mimi for years. So it's that's actually a really cute and endearing story.
Also, kind of encapsulate what Kwanzaa is all about. Is like community.
You know what's also interesting about that story? That's like a historical figure in Kwanzaa. But what's also interesting about that is that child that held the letter could still very easily be alive right now.
Oh, yeah, hopefully,
right?
Yeah,
probably like I don't know, like 70s though, pushing, getting a little up there, but still, I mean, that's pretty interesting. So it's created in 1966, which is an extremely new holiday.
1966. Everybody let that sink in, because when I heard 1966, I was like, am I listening to the wrong thing right here? Am I researching the wrong thing?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It is. I was thinking, we did the Harlem Renaissance episode, and they weren't even having an opportunity to celebrate their own holiday. But it's interesting because the colors that Professor Karenga, who he picked the colors.
What's his full name?
Malana Ron Karenga. Yeah, so he's a professor. He's an author. He's an activist. He's a polymath in a sense. Like he's at the top of his game in multiple different areas. And he wanted to find a way to celebrate Black culture and the history and the heritage. And most importantly, I think, which I think is really cool about this holiday, is the values comes in. And I think that's something that we try to get across with holidays like Christmas, but we kind of miss the mark. And I think that's very interesting. It's also about, you gotta remember the time that this is coming into fruition is just after the civil rights. The civil rights were passed in what, 64, 65? I mean, right after the death of Kennedy, who died in 64. LBJ got those passed. But this was a very important time for African Americans to reflect and rely on their heritage and find their strengths and reconnect with each other. And it was just kind of a beautiful thing. And those colors that he picks that represent Kwanzaa are borrowed from Marcus Garvey, who we talked about a little bit.
That's my guy right there, Marcus.
That's your guy, right?
Yeah,
he is great. And the colors, black, red, and green, they represent, black is obviously the people, and red is the struggle and the hard times and the hardships that they've had to go through, and the green is their future. So it's actually this really kind of beautiful thing that's doing this thing that we try to do during Christmas, and we'll probably talk about next week too, so I don't want to get into it too much, but checking out where we came from, looking at where we are right now, and figuring out where we want to go.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool.
And so this was inspired shortly after like the 1965 LA riots as well. So obviously there was kind of like this culmination of like violence and protest and all these things. And, being a Black activist, his idea was to give the people something that celebrates them and their culture and all that stuff, like you mentioned. But it also initially was to give them an alternative to Christmas, which felt more like, I guess, a white holiday, and not something that necessarily represented the Black people, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that was the early intentions behind it, which, I will mention that kind of that shifts over time. There are some individuals who, would celebrate Kwanzaa kind of in isolation, but like solely, I should say. But then there's other individuals who, as time goes along, may celebrate Christmas and Kwanzaa, or Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, depending on what religious beliefs they have. So, so essentially, he eventually kind of takes a stance backwards from that being an alternative from Christmas, and kind of says like, actually, he says some kind of like really rough things about the religious aspects, which are interesting at first, which he kind of retracts later. So he believed that Jesus was psychotic and that Christianity was a white religion that Black people should shun. So that was coming around like the 1960s time when this was originating. So, I mean, I guess you can maybe kind of understand some of the approach to that, kind of being a figure in the Black Power movement, and, kind of the oppression and like the violence that they were facing and things like that.
Well, I mean, historically, the Bible was used to oppress. It would provided some justification for slavery if you misread it, right? I mean, there's,
right.
That whole Noah and Ham thing. There's those lines in the Bible that people look to and say, hey, look, slavery is okay. So yeah, I get where like there's a historical oppression, for sure. I absolutely understand that.
But what he does over time, though, is kind of like starts to take a different approach or a different mindset behind it. And which I think is super like important, and shows kind of that ability to adapt and understand like what you're creating when it's going in a direction that maybe isn't what it's intended to do. So he kind of alters his position, and as it gets more mainstream, says like, it was not created to give people an alternative to their own religion or religious holiday. It's just something to kind of connect people in their culture. And one of the things that he says, and this is a quote, says, "You must have a cultural revolution before the violent revolution. The cultural revolution gives identity, purpose, and direction." So I think what he's kind of saying is before we get into the violence of what this movement is, we also have to understand who we are and where we want to go, and also understand where we came from, right?
Yeah, that's
So
so interesting. So he's conceptualizing a culture. I've never really thought about it like that. He's saying, as a culture, we need identity, purpose, and direction. And we're telling that to individuals
yeah,
every day. How hard to sort of get a whole culture to see exactly what you need to thrive and to do it through a holiday. I think it's pretty interesting. I think this guy's kind of a genius too, because not only is he using those things, he's bringing something that you really need into the fold if you're going to make something stick and make it really powerful. And that's the use of symbols, right?
yeah, yeah.
And that's, Kwanzaa is a symbolic holiday. There's tons of symbolism. And it's interesting that he's trying to create new symbolism. And some of the most prominent symbols are put around the table and a family gathers there at night. Like, for example, there's a candle holder, which is very similar to a menorah. It's called the Kanara. And the reason why it looks similar is because it's a menorah essentially with just one arm removed. Under the Kanara is a mat called Makika, and that's adorned with muhindi. And this is just corn, and the corn represents the children in the household. And I think that corn is a symbol we can all kind of get behind. It's a symbol of growth and life and sustenance. There's also mazao symbol, and this is fruit, and it just represents the harvest. I know, and I didn't know if I should try to just say these names, but I'm trying. And
Usually this is me, so this is nice for me to just watch you do it.
I know it's hard, and I'll end it with this one, zawadi, which is, it just means gifts. So the table and the decor, there's tons of colors and imagery. There's the Pan-African flag, of course. And we talked about what those symbols represent.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, like, it's a colorful holiday. It's interesting that they're bringing symbols on board, and I don't know, like a ground up kind of thing. And do you think this is something that's, Dave, in your opinion, I know we didn't have time to research a lot of this, but do you get the sense that people must be adding traditions and we celebrate Kwanzaa this way? And,
so 100%, this is a very, what would be the word? Individually interpreted celebration in some ways. There's some things that, like, obviously you just mentioned a bunch of symbols that are a part of the tradition, and you incorporate those things, but there's so much of how you celebrate this that is so individualistic, may look different per family, may look different in different years. It's really what you make it and how you connect to it, which is sort of beautiful because it doesn't tell you exactly how you're supposed to do it. It's what feels right to you in some ways,
Is that what Christmas has turned into in some ways?
But it's so commercialized that we are still told what Christmas should look like, right? There is a general idea of what Christmas is, and I think people buck against systems over time. Kwanzaa doesn't really have that. It's not like telling you have to do it this way. Like, I was going to mention this later, but like, there's no staple foods, right? There's no, like, on Christmas you have ham. There in Thanksgiving you have turkey. It's, you eat the foods of the culture based on how you connect to that culture, right?
Yeah.
So everybody has their favorite dishes that they might do. I listen to numerous people speak about Kwanzaa and just mention all the different dishes that they bring that are like their family staples, right? From different generations. I think that's so cool.
I think that's cool too. Now, do you think that not being connected to a religion, though, is a hindrance for this, or do you think it's helpful? I was trying to wrap my head around that.
All right. So I think it's in today's society, I think it's helpful because so many of our holidays these days are starting to, like, have moved away from almost the religious aspects of it, or they waver, depending on like the tone of society and how they're connecting. Because like I kind of see people doing a little bit more of the religious aspects of the Christmas celebrations like this year than I have in previous years, which I don't understand completely why, but maybe there's reasons for that. Anyways, this is never going to have that wavering. It's all about just being connected to your culture, which It's kind of like St. Patrick's Day, although there is a religious aspect to St. Patrick's Day that no one really
Well, I think
identifies
that
with. You know what I mean?
since it's cultural, I mean, there is sort of it maybe not
Oh,
be religious, but it's spiritual as hell, right? Because
well,
you're
oh,
like,
there is a spiritual component, 100% to this whole thing. But
yeah,
I just remember like Cinco de Mayo. Is there a religious component to Cinco de Mayo?
we better not even try to say.
And people love Cinco de Mayo.
They sure do. Yeah,
um,
Coronas and tacos.
yeah. And that brings up a good point though. Like we're, two Caucasian males who obviously have no cultural tie to like Cinco de Mayo or Kwanzaa, but like, do we participate in Cinco de Mayo celebrations? You better believe it. So
Had I been invited to a Kwanzaa party, it sounds like a blast.
but that's another thing is now non-African Americans are actually like celebrating Kwanzaa in some aspects. Like it is acceptable, I guess. Well, I guess from what I understand, if someone else tells me it's not acceptable, who am I to say no? But
I probably wouldn't do it. I feel like I would be like, there's like cultural appropriation, sort of. I don't know.
If someone invited me to a celebration, 100%, I would go.
Absolutely,
100%. I wouldn't. Yeah, I probably wouldn't hold a Kwanzaa party on my own.
Yeah,
that might be a little off base right there.
Yeah. And
I mean,
and
unless I'm wrong about that, I don't know.
He's trying his best. That's what I would say. He's really putting himself out there.
You mentioned the candles. So there's 7 candles. And, you'd also mentioned the colors and kind of what they represent. So 3 of the 7 candles are red, representing the struggle. 3 of the candles are green, representing land and hope for the future. And 1 of the candles is black, representing the people of African descent. I just like how everything's thought out and everything kind of represents these themes, right? And then also a big part of the Kwanzaa celebrations is like the dress up and decorating your home with all these colors, which you already mentioned. But like there's certain like attire that people might wear during the celebrations, which is cool.
Were you able to figure out why 7 seems to be an important number? Because there's 7 virtues. Is it because of the 7 virtues? Or is there 7?
I believe. Yeah, I believe
Okay.
it's because of the 7 virtues. So yeah, do you want to get into those 7 virtues?
I guess we can, yeah. And this is probably my favorite part about it. It's like
this is the bread and butter of it.
This is the bread and butter because every day you're bringing to mind and being mindful, I would say, about a sort of virtue or a value. And
I have a question for you.
Sure, yeah.
Hanukkah. How many nights?
8.
8 crazy nights, right?
Mm-hmm.
As the Adam Sandler cartoon
That's
goes.
right. Yeah.
All right. So, and are there nights? I know you do like a gift a day or something, or a gift a night in Hanukkah. Is there like a theme?
There might be. I remember how I had one of my best friends growing up. His name was Isaac Gordon, who was a Jewish guy, and he would be like,
he's probably more than just that, but that's how you identified him. So okay.
Yeah, he was a lot more than that. But he would tell me, yeah, we get presents every day for 8 days, but they're not great. That's what he would say. I don't know if that was his family thing. It'd be like a box of pencils and stuff.
Isaac Gordon sounds like he had a hard time just being satisfied.
He did. He should have been appreciative. Like, I think his parents were one of those that like, all right, you're going to get something to learn with. And this is, they have a lot of this too. Like these gifts that they get, they're supposed to like, one's supposed to connect to their culture. One's supposed to connect to their future. So like learning, but.
All right. So there are themes.
There's total themes. Yeah.
Okay. So back to this.
December 26th.
We didn't mention that. It starts on December 26th and
which
ends
is very convenient.
In January 1st, it ends.
Yeah. Yep, all the way through. So if you are planning on celebrating Christmas and you want to do Kwanzaa and just like roll it into a nice little holiday right into New Year's, I mean, it's actually kind of nice.
Yeah, so, but initially people wouldn't celebrate Christmas.
No, they drop it,
and then they would have to wait till the next day to have a celebration.
That's tough,
and everything's closed. They're like, I can't even go to a grocery store.
You can get Chinese food.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't know if you're, whatever. So December 26th. So the name of the value is Umoja. And this is Swahili for unity. And this day you're going to try to strive for maintain with the family. You're going to think about the community. You're going to think of yourselves as a part of a nation and part of a race. and start to really think about like, how am I using this in my life? This is an important value of mine, the unity of us all, and what am I doing to kind of keep us together and rejoin and regroup with the people of my culture? Like, how am I celebrating my culture on a daily basis?
Yeah.
So that's December 26th. Why don't you jump in for December 27th here?
You can do that one.
Okay. Another Swahili word. And this one is called Kuji Shagulia. That might have been right.
I think it was actually. I'll do the next one.
And this is Swahili for self-determination.
Yeah.
And the focus of this day is to define yourselves, figure out who it is you want to be, because that's a widely important thing about identity. Like, who is it? Not where I've come from, not what's happened to me, but who is it that I want to be? And what can I do to take steps to create a new version of myself, a version of myself that I can really honor and enjoy and like, you know?
Kwanzaa's awesome. December 28th, Ujima,
Mhm.
which is Swahili for collective work and responsibility. The focus of this day is to build and maintain our community together, as well as make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. So families often take this day to work towards common goals, such as cleaning the house, kind of representing like working together as a larger community, right?
Yeah, this is really community building. I really like this.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
It's so representative of exactly what its intention is, and that's what I love about this. Like, the whole intention was like, we're a population of people oppressed. We're trying to push forward. We're trying to integrate without losing our identities and ourselves, which we've talked about in like the Things Fall Apart episode. For people who didn't listen to that, it's about, the colonization, right? It's like about having, tribes having to lose who they are in order to basically stay alive, right? And this is about the opposite. It's like, we're not going to just lose who we are. We want to stay, but we're going to work together to do it, right?
Yeah, so what you were talking about with Things Fall Apart and the colonization, the struggles, those are red. That's represented with the red. And what you're trying to work towards is represented with the green. It's so cool. And it's also this idea where it's like, hey, look, we know that we want to move forward as a culture. We know that we want to like regain this pride and sense of togetherness. It's just like, how do you really be mindful about it? How do you do it instead of just being like, I want that for us? This is sort of giving you steps. Hey, this is how you do it. Like, let's pay attention to how you do it. And December 29th.
Did we just become Kwanzaa therapists? Like, is this going to be the new layout for our therapy? Like, I feel like there is something so valuable here.
So there's a ton valuable here, and it reminds me there's a lot of forms of Japanese therapies that list a bunch of values like this, whether it's like Ikigai, or there's a couple of different books that outline these beautiful values, and it's like makes so much sense to kind of remind yourself of those.
Yeah.
And December 29th is no different, Dave. And this is kind of more of a practical one. You'll tell by the name, Ujima, with an extra A. Yep. Yeah. Swahili, which you wouldn't think Swahili would have had a lot of words for this, but this is cooperative economics. And this day is all about, like, we want to maintain our own stores. We want to get our own shops going. Like, we want to have businesses that profit and help each other out. So many people use this day to support Black-owned businesses and Black-operated businesses through obvious, purchases, right? Going there and buying things that you can donate, or you can just tell a friend. And that's very helpful as well.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's very, like, you see how it's like, let's do this together. Let's support each other. I like that.
100%. December 30th is Nia, which is Swahili for purpose. The focus of this day is to make our collective vocation the building and developing of our community, to restore our people to their traditional greatness.
Yeah.
Just purpose. I mean, we talk about purpose all the freaking time.
How is it? It's one of the most important things. And I think the next one, December 31st, is a weirdly even more important. I don't know. There's something that people don't talk about this enough, and it's Kumba.
I talk about Kumba quite a bit, though.
I know. I should give you more credit. You are always mentioning Kumba. Swahili for creativity. And creativity is something that people don't really talk about a lot, but it's such an important way to kind of make the community more beautiful and find people's strengths, and it benefits people. There's something about like art
Yeah.
that really, whether it's in forms of like when we talked about the Harlem Renaissance, whether it's like poetry or literature or paintings and
Yeah.
music, whatever it is, it's like it's expressing yourself and giving yourself, like, creating something that you can be proud of.
And it's identity.
Yes, it is
It's
identity.
identity.
Exactly.
Think about every time we've ever mentioned like a Renaissance period in this, it's
Mhm.
always artistic, like themes, like artists, poets, all those things. And it's always about establishing an identity. Even like the freaking goth movement, it's like it's all about identity through art, right? And creativity.
Identity,
It's like
purpose, and
it is the
direction.
basis. Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool.
So
January
why-
1st
Yeah.
is probably my favorite. Imani, which means faith in Swahili.
Mm.
I never knew that. That's like a word that I've heard used as like a person's name a few times. And I thought that
Really?
was kind of cool.
Imani, faith.
Yeah.
I've actually heard of Faith used that as a name as well.
They should be called Imani because that is way cooler.
Interchangeable.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
They're both cool. So the
Also
focus,
Hope, which is kind of the same thing.
Oh, okay. And the Anchor, Rhode Island, all that stuff.
Yep.
Connections. The focus of this day is to believe with all of our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. So this encapsulates that whole movement of when this started, which is awesome. Since it's last day of the holiday, those who celebrate often host a gathering feast called a karamu to conclude their observations and festivities through the holiday. Though the holiday is the week-long feast, the karamu is often an opportunity to open the celebration to friends and extended family. And yeah, it sounds like a blast.
Yeah, so it does sound like a blast. And I wonder if we'll ever have an opportunity to kind of be a part of something like this. I was thinking about that. Like,
if there's a listener who celebrates Kwanzaa and is willing to invite Greg and I,
a couple of white candles.
I'm going. I'm there.
Yeah, that would be great.
Please.
It's got to be kind of local, though.
I can travel.
All right, fair enough.
I will go. So this is Kwanzaa is really, it's about self because it's like about establishing an identity, but it's so much about community, and that's what makes it. It's that thing that we've been talking about a lot in recent weeks. It's about that thing that like there has to be something more than just you, right?
Mm. You
You can't be the most important person in your own story, right? Like you're valuable, but like there has to also be something you're working towards that's larger than you. And
Absolutely.
I think that's what this is, right?
I think that's something that's often missed in today's society that was almost went without saying for millennia. This idea that you have to have something that's important to you, that's bigger than you, that's, that you want to go on even when you're gone. Like if you ask someone that question now, and we've talked about this in the past, like, what do you want to exist even when you're gone? I mean, that's a hard question to answer now. People would say like, oh, the church, my country, whatever, right? But like, you're right. If there's something so meaningful about being part of something that you think is bigger than you, cultural, this is great.
Just on what you just said right there, there's something that just came to my mind because I just saw it's like some stupid YouTube video like shortly before we started recording, and it really pissed me off.
Okay.
Another thing that people probably wouldn't say they would want to continue after they're gone, but like if they knew what it looked like if it went away, they probably would say it. Like courteousness, chivalry, manners, respect for elders, like things that people like kind of, it was like kind of a given for a period of time, but like as we all know, those things are kind of unfortunately going away. I just watched some video of some like a YouTuber that was like just walking around the mall. He had a bodyguard and he was like some punk kid, and like he was like getting up in people's faces, and he like bumped an old lady and like did it to her, and then he did it to some other kid, and the kid like turned around and started to like almost fight him until the bodyguard got in. But I was like, it's just a lack of respect or lack of like, yeah, and if I think that like our ancestors could see that go away, they would be disgusted with some of the
What is
behavior
it,
that.
Dave? That's such an interesting thing, and it's like this respect for, I don't know, just common human decency.
Right.
What is it that manners provide? And I don't, this might be an unanswerable question, but there's a certain reverence there where it's like you don't laugh at a funeral. You don't, you know, I don't know. Like if you see a really old like war veteran or something, you don't, you kind of should have like a certain level of, or an old person in general. They've made it this long. Like they've gone through a lot. There's no reverence for those kinds of things. And I think you feel good when you do treat people with
Oh,
courtesy.
100%. But, day one of Kwanzaa is about unity. And without reverence, without, all these things that manners, courtesy, like respect, you don't have any unity, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just individual. You're all individuals. Everybody is just doing whatever they want. There's no, like, we have those things to create societal norms that will allow us all to be able to coexist without conflict or with minimal conflict, right?
Yeah, like almost
Um,
equality. Like you respect
yes.
everyone, so there's
Yep.
a level of equality there. You put in your notes this idea that libations are shared. I can only assume that that's drinks, like
Yeah.
alcohol.
Wine,
Yeah,
whatever. Yep. Yep.
and they share it with a common chalice, and you pass it around. And I think that this is what we're talking about, where like maybe this symbolizes, like, hey, look, we're all kind of working at the same thing here. We're all drinking from the same cup. We're all
We're
equal.
community. We're
Yeah,
all
we should all
community.
treat each other as
Yes.
such.
So it's like losing your individual ego
Mm,
to be. It's not like you're losing your individuality because this is what your culture is, what makes you individual, right? In some ways,
yeah.
but it also makes you community. It's an interesting kind of idea, right? Um, but yeah, it builds community. You put your ego aside so you can join in the community, this group that you're connected to.
Yeah, imagine if you went around trying to make other people feel like they're a part of something and that they're valued and respected. Boy, that's not going to cause any, that's just like a beautiful thing. Like how you could you could wake up, and this is like a reminder for the rest of the year too. Like you could wake up and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to treat people with respect today and treat them like they're worth something and they deserve respect."
Yeah.
And just see how that works out. And I
Yeah.
bet you'll make some people feel good, and I guess a pretty cool byproduct of that is you probably feel pretty good yourself.
Right. That Karamu celebration at the end, um, it sounds like a blast. I mean, there's like you said, there's the libations, there's drumming, there's musical selections, there's a reading of of the African pledge and the principles of blackness, reflection of the Pan African colors, discussions of the African principle of the day or chapter in African history. It's just like a lot of just connecting to the things that your community is connected to, your heritage, right?
Do other cultures? I mean, seems like a very kind of cool thing. Like I'm trying to think of other cultures having a very specific holiday just for a very specific culture. They must, right? Like maybe Chinese New Year. I've heard of that, but I don't really hear of like too many things where it's like one very specific culture that we're not all just kind of like diving in on.
Juneteenth.
Okay.
I mean, that's a newer one, obviously,
Yeah,
but
another
because that's
another new
kind
one.
of that.
It's cool. I like it.
I'm trying to think now that you say that.
Yeah. Like,
So one of the interesting things, Greg, and let me see if you have any thoughts about this.
okay.
There is potential that there is some decline in the popularity of the celebrating of Kwanzaa.
Mhm.
I did read that. I don't know what the stats are. I'm not going to pretend to know. But if you had to take a guess as to why you think the popularity decrease might be, what ideas might you have? And one, just to kind of put this out there, one idea was that maybe it's because there are other holidays that are already celebrating African American culture. So maybe that has kind of maybe lessened the excitement about this longer 7-day celebration. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. You got Juneteenth, you got Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
There's Malcolm X Day, which I kind of never really hear anyone talk about, but that is a day. I think it's May 19th. So I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is, thanks for putting me on the spot, but one is you mentioned the rise of individualism where people care a lot more about how they feel versus how they're making other people feel. Like
Yes.
there's less of a sense to be like, hey, let's all get together and just make everyone feel good and work together on something. It's all about how can I get ahead, not how can we get ahead as a group. And you see that through, I mean, politics. We're very polarized. There's more of an urge or a push to divide rather than come together. It seems like culturally, that's the shift
Sure.
that we're in right now. And I don't love that at all. In fact, I think it's very damaging. Also, anything that's, based on values and doing something that's people might look at it a little like that's corny or lame or whatever. Like if you talked about if you go to school, you said your kid at school and they talk about how they're going to be, you're talking about knightly values and virtues. It's like, oh, I'm chivalrous. I open the door for all the ladies. I'm very respectful. I have good manners. I'm courageous. Like I don't think people value that like they used to. It's kind of
No.
laughed at and mocked.
Yeah.
And I think that the downfall of if this holiday is losing ground, I think it just another reflection of society's sort of dip in
Yeah.
what I think is important, and
Now,
that's a shame.
I would like to know, and because I don't know exactly how old that source was. I know that they had a stat from like 2019, so I don't know if it's a newer article for from 2019. It would be interesting to get some data on that because I would think there would be an increase within the more recent years, with like the popularity of Juneteenth and obviously the Black Lives Matter movement that happened and things like that. I think there was a bigger push towards the culture and things like that. So it would be interesting to know if maybe that's made a rebound or if there is still some decline. There is another interesting thing I want to ask you. So starting in the 1990s, the holiday became more commercialized. There was actually its first Hallmark card was sold in 1992. Some people have kind of expressed that it being more commercialized could be potentially damaging to the holiday's values. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's going to highlight the things that make it marketable and how people can make money from it. Like, so it's funny that you mentioned, like, say, ask this kind of thing, like the values declining on it and like the real meaning of it being lost because of commercialization. And I just, with my kids, watched Charlie Brown Christmas,
Mhm.
which I mean, look, I love it, but if you're showing it to kids for the first time, it's a snooze fest. I mean, it's a real drag. But the kid, they ask Linus like, "What's the real meaning of Christmas?" And I'm like, "Oh, we should probably listen to this." And then he just does like a reads like a Bible scripture, right? And it's kind of just tells a story about maybe like the three wise men finding the baby, whatever it is.
Yeah.
All I know is that's like if that's at one time, even in the 60s, was the meaning of Christmas, then that's been lost on every single kid I know. Right? I mean, when you ask a kid right now, like, what's the meaning of Christmas? I think that every single, or your favorite part of Christmas, I think that unfortunately every single one of them is going to say presents.
Presents. And the ironic thing is that Charlie Brown Christmas episode was actually a commercial, a large ad. Remember, we talked about that in the Christmas episode. It was actually a large, was it Coca-Cola?
Yes. And then that's crazy because it was reaming against commercialism.
So it was actually commercialized, even though the meaning, like they talk about the meaning not being commercial. So that's
genius. That's almost like the whole. Have you ever seen Miracle on 34th Street? Now we're like dipping into Christmas for a second, but have you ever seen that?
Nah, like yes, but like so long ago, I don't. I know the premise, but yeah.
Well, yeah. So the Santa is like he's saying he works at Macy's, and if someone doesn't have like a gift that they're getting at Macy's, he'll like tell them somewhere to go, and that was a big upheaval. But then they figured out like, oh wow, that's actually doing great for our business. That's kind of like what they did with that commercial, that Charlie Brown thing, where it's like, you know what, we could just say how much we can't stand commercialism, and it'll be endearing, and people will buy our stuff. It's crazy,
right?
So yeah, long way to say like. Obviously,
yes.
if you commercialize it, it's bad.
So it's funny because it's like twofold. if you're starting off something, the idea of it getting commercialized almost feels like, oh, we finally reached notoriety. People
Yeah.
are aware of it now. We built awareness, so it's spreading. Um, you know, it's getting some legitimacy, but then it gets to a point where it's like, all right, no, this is going the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's all right. So you know what it's like, and this is a weird example, but it's like Pride being like Target taking like everything and turning it Pride during Pride
Yep.
Month, right?
It's like, thanks, Target.
It's like we're drawing attention to Pride Month, but we're also making a ton of money because we're just selling you like towels that are a rainbow or something like that.
Yeah,
And
and people want a virtue signal. And the other thing with this is too, it's like, okay, so Hallmark selling the cards, and it's supposed to be the Black community supporting itself and giving its and helping itself and taking care of itself. But it's like, who are the executives at Hallmark?
How do they
making
benefit
money?
from?
Yeah.
Yeah, and no shade to Target. Like I'm sure those towels are great quality.
Yeah.
So I just want to say,
And never shade to Target, right? I mean, you like that's a
not trying to
sponsor
start any.
proud sponsor the podcast. We wish.
Um. So I was going to actually ask you. You asked me earlier about the fact of it and not having a religious connection. Does that make it like is that a benefit or whatnot? So that was interesting that you asked me that same question. I was going to ask you.
What do you think, though? Did we really kind of dive into that? Because I think that we talked a little about how it's spiritual, but it's like they're drawing on the ancestors, the pride of the ancestors, and
but you know that with that culture, with some of that ancestry, like faith and spirituality is so ingrained in it, right? It's
yeah.
So I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand. I don't know. It's interesting because it's a good question to ask but also like my answer might be different than someone else's. Like there's some people that probably would prefer it to have some attachment to their religion versus their heritage.
Yeah, like you can have like a cool holiday that has no attachment to religion at all.
Sure. I mean, I've mentioned this on here. Like I'm yearning for more like cultural significance in my life. Like we talk about that. I love traditions. I often felt like I don't have enough traditions in my life, and I love exploring other cultures' traditions. So to me, it's like, damn, I wish I had a Kwanzaa to celebrate this way.
I know you do, Dave. I know you do.
I need,
and I feel
Kwanzaa.
for you. I wish that like we had someone that could create something for you. But the problem with us is I think we're well, you're a mixed bag. It's not like we're full blood at anything, right?
Right,
we're just
right.
So it's hard to. I mean, we get the 4th of July, which is actually kind of similar in a sense, right? Because it's based on, like our own mythology in a sense. I don't know. It's hard to.
So it's like if we moved to another country and then we decided, like, I want to keep my 4th of July traditions alive.
That'd be exactly what it's kind of like,
Except I would have to be like taken there against my will. And
so it's different.
And then generations would have to go on and then decide they want.
It would take a while. It would take a while.
It's like a long game approach, really. But
it would take a while, but you're laying the groundwork a little bit, and I think that's cool.
Yeah.
No, this is a fun one.
I think we covered everything that I was hoping we would, and that actually, I knew that this was going to be something fascinating because it like it does, like we talked about throughout this whole episode. It touches on so many things that you and I freaking talk about with patients in therapy all the freaking time. Like there's so many things here that I think are valuable. So if people that are listening weren't familiar with Kwanzaa, like there's value into just even learning to what it's about. You don't have to like celebrate it in order to understand and appreciate. There is like so many great themes here that we could all use.
Absolutely. And that's something that is missing when we are kind of like going into that individualistic society and not kind of really paying attention to this like collective intelligence, right? That we like you get into any of these holidays, and if you get at their core, it is kind of about these things like the reminder of who we want to be and how we've lived this year. It's like a year-ending thing. It's like how have I been this year? Have I been following this purpose? Have I been contributing to who I want to be? Have I been someone that people can rely on? Have I been supporting my community? Have I been doing any of these things? If not, like maybe I need to readjust. I think that's cool. It's like a check-in. It keeps you straight,
Yeah. So here's what I will say, going back to that question about the attachment to religion or not having attachment to religion. What I like about Kwanzaa and most of our holidays are about celebrating something, right? So this celebrates something, but like it's the community piece and how you build a community and how you move forward and sets and goal setting and things like that. That's the piece that I think kind of sets this almost, if like people were more aware of this, I feel like it almost sets it above other
Yeah.
holiday traditions, and in a way makes it a little bit more, I think, easier, unless you don't care about community and you just want presents. So I don't know, I do think there's a lot to love.
It's funny that like he probably had to, he's building this holiday and someone was like, if you want this to work, you're gonna have to add presents.
You just got to.
You gotta add presents.
You can't have it so many days and no presents.
Yeah, how are we gonna really hook them in?
And I do find it interesting that there's not more of a focus on food, because food is like the language of so many cultures, but it's kind of unspoken, I feel like, because I feel like food is probably an integral piece of this.
If you guys invited to something like this would be incredible. Just to see if like, on this 26th, do you have like a little speech? Do we sit around the table and kind of talk like you would on Thanksgiving? Like, what am I thankful for? Or, like, I wonder if it's like part of it.
It'd be awesome if we were at a table at a Kwanzaa celebration and they're like, would anyone like to say anything? I'd be like, I do.
Dave does.
I want to go first.
And you're like,
and they're like, of course you do.
What day is this? Is this Kuba? It depends. Ujima Day? Okay, I got this. All right, so yeah, no, this is Kwanzaa and this is fun. This is a really cool holiday. And you know what? It makes me want to explore. It does make me want to interested in Hanukkah, because
that's gonna have to be next year.
Yeah,
we did a coin toss to see which one we're gonna do this year. Kwanzaa won. I'm really glad it won because this was interesting, and I feel like I learned a lot. And I have a whole new appreciation for this holiday. So,
well, here's something, Dave, that we never get to give the people for next year. This is a prequel. Before we do any research about Hanukkah, what's it about? You got anything?
Oh, I know.
Is it like some kind of siege? It's like 8 days,
8 crazy nights.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. I feel like something was like,
what we should do?
The lights were going to go out or something.
If we're still doing this by next year.
Yeah.
Hopefully, our hope is we are also going to have some bonus episodes that people will be able to listen to. That's the little thing we have in discussion.
Okay.
And maybe we do a pre-episode bonus episode of us trying to guess what Hanukkah is about.
I would love that.
And then
see how close we get.
And then we'll have our regular episode and kind of see how we landed.
It's almost like a great idea for a podcast anyway.
We should do that with everything.
Yeah.
Some probably be like,
yeah.
I don't know. Not for everything, but for
we can't do it with the psychologicals ones because they'd be like, you guys probably should have been a little bit closer.
Yeah. A lot of people lose some faith in us. So this is Kwanzaa. If you celebrate Kwanzaa, hit us up, invite us to your party. We want to be there.
We would love to be there.
If you don't want us there, I totally understand. Just saying. So all right, so just kind of go back to the Spotify thing again. Since the majority of our listeners are on Spotify, we decided also that we recently started to upload videos to Spotify, which I didn't even know you could do. So now if you're listening on Spotify, you also have the option to watch us if you so dare.
So Dave, I tried to get on the creator thing and
it's probably like a off-air conversation.
Yeah.
You want to share the password with you again?
You're probably right.
Like, where are you going with this, Greg? Greg can't understand technology. Surprise.
Weird. I know. It's really bad.
So Spotify is kind of our bread and butter. We do the best on there. So if people reach out to us, know that we will get back to you now. I do have to get back to a few more people. So if you'll have to comment and I didn't respond, we will.
How many are we talking? How many comments do you think we're talking?
A decent amount, actually. And this has been going on for a while. So I feel bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
more than on the other one?
Yeah. No. I mean, total reviews, we have a decent amount of reviews at this point, but just enough to make it so that I feel bad that we have neglected them. But yeah, keep leaving comments, and ratings and reviews are super appreciative. We need those in order to hit like those algorithms so that our podcast kind of keeps reaching wider audiences. Otherwise, it becomes just a thing we do for 3 listeners. And then
Yeah.
we'll probably stop doing it at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, we hope to continue this. And also for anyone who's reached out to us, we appreciate it. Thank you for the feedback. Oh, I had one last thing. I got to do this really quick. I apologize because I know we're trying to wrap up. There was fan mail, and I feel like I got to read it because that is what we do. Did you already read it?
No, I was
reading it right now.
I was looking for it.
Yep, I got it up. All right, real
Okay.
quick. All right, so this was from someone who's actually messaged us a number of times. Just wanted to ask us a question. So he goes, not sure if this is an example of a cognitive distortion or not. What is it when you relate many statements, images, and other sensory input to the same seemingly unrelated topics with great regularity? Associated thinking, question mark. Every time you mention David Burns, I think, what does David Byrne from the Talking Heads have to do with mental health other than being a character? Then I think of David Bowie, since I'm kind of obsessed with him, who had a vast vocabulary, was incredibly well read, and one of his greatest fears was being comfortable in his life. Thanks for reading, Tyler, the Bowie fan who used the word erudite in previous review. P.S. Keep up the therapeutic-minded illumination for all of us darkly disturbed peons. I love that. The first thing I think of is like he's going as like rabbit hole thinking, right?
Yeah.
You just start spiraling.
Well, what do you connect that with? Obviously, I would probably connect that with, and I don't want to say like ADHD would be like diagnosable kind of thing. I think it's a beautiful thing where like your mind's kind of charged up, ready to go, looking for connections. That's what minds are supposed to do. So I think that's a cool thing. Not a bad thing.
I actually have a couple of patients that talk to me about that. One, and I don't want to like scare anyone, but I also don't think this is something you should be scared of at all. One individual, I did end up having a hunch, and then he got his neuropsych testing, and he was like just on the cusp of autism spectrum disorder. In which I said it shouldn't be scary because it's actually a really like valuable thing in some ways. It's just like understanding the way that your mind works. But he would do that. He would do word association, and he would talk about how it would happen at school. And he would just sit there, and suddenly like 20 minutes went by, and he's just like doing word associations and going down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And he had no idea what just happened, like what his teacher was talking about anymore.
Do you feel like you do that sometimes? I feel like I do that sometimes.
Maybe to an extent, but I zone out all the time. I talk about that all the time. Like I'm a daydreamer. Do I do word associate? I mean, to an extent, but like not to what I heard like described to me. So I guess it would depend on the severity. Could be ADHD, could be just like daydreaming, and you just like
could be anxiety too, where like you've done it once and then you kind of lightly noticed yourself doing it again, and you're like, oh my god, am I doing that thing again? And you're getting in your thoughts about it. It's a conversation. Yeah, it's not something that I would if you notice yourself doing it and it worries you, and you can pull yourself away from it, and you can kind of see it, and it's I don't think it's really something to worry about too much.
Here's the key. If you have any issue or anything that you feel like, oh, this could potentially be an issue, it really doesn't matter until it starts to interfere with any of your daily functioning or tasks that you need to get involved in. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I got some weird things about me.
Sure.
But like until it actually interferes with stuff that like I need to do or my daily living, it really doesn't matter. Like my daydreaming what became an issue at some point. So I had to address that.
They're like Earth to Dave.
Yeah. No, I mean it also highlighted it was an ADHD thing. It was like it highlighted like, and it was like doing daydreaming, procrastination, just feeling stuck, like lack of motivation to like do things that I needed to do, but like couldn't pull myself to do it. It became a whole thing. And I went a very long time without addressing it, but then realized like, wow, I could be functioning so much better. But like, there's other things that I do.
As long as if you're noticing like little things about yourself that are like quirky or whatever, it's never a huge deal if you're like noticing things, but it's like it's like when you're behaving and you didn't notice it. That's when things are a little
that too.
You know?
But also, people love quirky people these days. It's like lean into it, you know?
Yeah.
Put that on your dating profile.
Yeah, like, you know, it's
Go
it was
into
funny.
rabbit holes. It's just a
Yeah.
weird thing about me. Kind of adorable, right? And like,
That's
people
what I
like
try
it.
to. My son never knows what to say when he like meets a new girl, and I said to him, "Say that." Like, you know what I mean? Like, go to the
Lean into it.
Yeah, go up to her and be like, I have to say something to you. I never know what to say when approaching a new person that I find attractive. I don't know what to say. So, hi.
Can you stop being so attractive so I can like think of things to say?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Up, going down a rabbit hole of beauty. Right? Kind of thing.
All right.
But anyways, that's
No,
Kwanzaa.
I hope that was like somewhat helpful.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, sorry, Tyler. But no, honestly, like I wouldn't stress it unless it, like I said, unless it interferes with stuff. But like, also kind of cool. Write it down. Write down all those different associations.
Yeah, it is kind of cool,
It's
actually.
like a puzzle, you know?
Love that.
All right. So next week, big week, we got our big Christmas episode coming up because Christmas will be the day after it releases. So we got a little special thing for you. I mean, we're really at this point, like next year is gonna be tough. We're squeezing everything out of Christmas. Three episodes in on that one. So yeah, a little different than the last two that we did with like traditions and stuff. We're gonna do a little deep dive on a classic. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Yeah. All right. That's all we got. I'll see you guys later. Have a good night. Peace.